right. I am very grateful to have the relentlessly helpful LinkedIn nerd available on the Janus Oasis. So, for those of you who don't recognize that introduction, that is Janus Berian, who runs Espresso Plus and has been ridiculously helpful to many people around the world. I often start my day chatting with John and the people in his group. And I start in the UK, and by half an hour later, I could be in Australia or where else do we have? We have people all around the globe, right? You actually have a map, right, John?
We have a map. We have people all over the place. And thank you for helping to represent Canada, Nola.
Yes, I'm gradually crafting. When I first joined, there was only one other person, and then somebody I knew joined, and John just actually informed me that somebody else in Toronto has just joined. So we have four Canadians. So I highly recommend, if you are actually looking to build out your LinkedIn knowledge and really actually just like having a supportive place online, John's group is incredibly worth it. So he's just reopened the doors, but those doors are going to be closing very quickly when he actually reaches 300. And you're going to actually keep it there, John?
Yeah, that's the plan. I just want to do everything myself and make it all personal. And that means I just can't support a massive community on my own. So I thought 300 was a good cutoff point, and we're about 2/3 of the way there at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes, it will be a small community moving forward, but we all get to know each other. We get to work together, and hopefully we get to support each other's businesses. That's the plan.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's right. And it was funny. I joined LinkedIn Audio. I got a notification yesterday on a LinkedIn Audio for is somebody who's actually two people are part of your group. And I went on stage and I'm like, I just had to say hi. And they're like, yes, Espresso Plus is in the house.
Nice. That's lovely. It's lovely
Yeah,
to see the connections that people make all
yeah,
over the world. When you've got some commonality, it makes it a global village, doesn't it? Everything becomes a bit smaller, but
yeah.
it's really cool.
It is super cool. And that's actually why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I've always been involved in creating community. I actually started it when I started working on LinkedIn, but I took the LinkedIn skills that I was building at the time and I started applying it internally. And I
Mhm.
started growing like employee voice groups internally on Yammer. And eventually I founded an employee resource group in ERG. And it's really the same sort of skill. That group was actually to support parents when the pandemic started. And then it was actually then formalized into an employee resource group. But I'm also looking at building community around the Janus Oasis. And that's where I thought John could really be helpful in terms of how do you encourage people to participate. And one of the things that I really like about your group and the way that you operate is you have this approach where people who are essentially technically competitors come out and they support you and they cheer you and you share tips and you collaborate, and it's the most wonderful experience to see people working together and supporting each other. So what's your magic that you start with?
I think the starting point is not to be afraid of traditional competition, and to see if you have this kind of abundance mentality where there is enough work to go around, if you're good enough at what you're doing, that you don't need to be fearful of traditional competitors. Because I think being fearful of competitors really means that you try to keep your information to yourself, which is
Mhm.
a really bad idea in the internet age, because information isn't a secret anymore. And you just give off good signals when, if you're willing to speak to anyone and everyone without kind of being guarded about potential competitors. I think that just signals confidence and authority and real leadership in your field. And that's just always the way I've been. I've never really worried about competitors, and I guess people see that over time and they trust you more because of it.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. And then the other part of that is giving people a voice. Everyone wants to be heard, and I think too much is built around just building an audience. That's great, but it's a one-way street. But a
Yeah.
community means that people can talk back to you and they feel heard and they feel empowered. And that's the bit that was missing from the puzzle for me. And that's what I've spent the last few months really focusing on, is giving people a voice and making them feel like they matter. And that's where all the good stuff has been unlocked, I think.
And do you find that it's different having it like in a private group? Do people
Definitely,
express more?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of people have told me that they post things within the group that they would not post publicly, or they try things that they would not do publicly because they realize that they're in a safe space of other people who are just trying to do the same sort of thing as them.
Yeah.
They're unlikely to meet any kind of trolls or any kind of negativity. Everyone is trying to cheerlead for each other.
Yeah.
And that just reduces the friction. It just makes everything a bit easier.
Yes, I was encouraged to create my first GIF within your group.
Oh, yeah, there's an example in point. We've
Yeah.
had other members of the group who've been on video for the first time and they've never turned on their camera before. It's just all of these little micro steps. If you feel like you're in a psychologically safe space, you can push yourself more than you thought you might be able to. And it's totally understandable because in the big wide world of, let's say, LinkedIn with 800 plus million members, where you've got no kind of safety net, what if you crash and burn? What if you get trolls? It's understandable that people would want to hold back, but in a small, tightly knit group, they can express themselves more, and that's exactly what's been happening.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. It's a different environment within the group, and it's just fun and supportive. And it's not that people don't disagree. It's a safe space, like you say, so you can actually and express an opinion and get feedback and advice really on whether your take is accurate or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, it's all about being heard, isn't it? So people can feel free to speak their mind and get tips, exchange ideas, and not have layers of judgment put on them by people they don't really know or care about. We get to know each other inside the group because you're interacting with a lot of the same people all the time. So it's all been positive.
Yeah. And I get a lot of connections when I joined that audio group yesterday. I had actually sent her a note previously, and she connected because I had joined the audio event and because I was part of your group. Because one thing you should know about John, he also has a strict no douche canoe rule. So, what is your definition of douche canoe?
Well, when I was researching for my book, I came up with this idea of the ideal customer that you want to try to attract. But then also you want to try to repel people, counterintuitive though that might seem. And I thought, well, let's just imagine who that person would be. What are the red flags that would be waving if this nightmare customer were to come my way? And I just imagined this slick back hair, oversized gold watch, always late to meetings, always thought he knew best, loads of last minute changes, just a really unpleasant person to deal with. And I just characterized this guy as the salesy douche canoe. And I put that in a chapter of my book, and I started using that terminology, and lots of people have echoed it back to me. So I've just stuck with using it. So that person and people like that are the ones I want to avoid, because, avoiding headaches is just as important, if not more so, than attracting your ideal clients, because you just don't want those nightmares in your life. So
Yep.
No
And I
doubt.
actually took your advice the other day too, and it wasn't necessarily douche canoe, but it was about what you don't do. You had given advice, write what down what services you don't do. So I actually published that on my business page the other day. But you met a douche canoe on was it Twitter today? John is stepping back from doing copywriting. You've been doing copywriting for what, 12 years?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that was actually the thing that you're referring to happened a little while ago. But yes, I had a recommended list of copywriters, and there was someone who felt entitled enough that he should be on there when I didn't really know him that well. And yeah, so that didn't end particularly well, and we're not in contact anymore. But I always say that this is not the only kind of list that I publish, but I always say that if someone is asking to be on one of my lists, they're probably never going to be on the list, because that's the sort of person I tend not to associate with.
Right.
I like people who get on with their work, who are quite humble and probably wouldn't be forceful enough to say, I should be on that list, put me on that list. So yeah, that was a bit awkward, but it's been an interesting experience, and that it's been really well received. So yes, you're right. I've been paying the bills through copywriting for more than a decade. But actually, the thing that really stirs me is helping people on LinkedIn and also running the Espresso Plus community. And for that reason, you're not going to be able to hire me to write vowels and consonants anymore, realistically. I'm just going to focus on LinkedIn and the community.
Yes, I love the way that you put that. The copywriting is showing. Although I was interested in what your definition of juicy is. because you will accept commissions if
Well,
they are particularly juicy.
yeah, that's right. And I don't want to completely say never. Some, like my favorite football team, wanted a brochure to be written and happened to find me. I'm not going to go, well, I don't really do writing anymore, so I'm going to say no. So if it's something I'm particularly interested in, then of course I'll give it some consideration. But you've got to, I think it's important to stay in your lane. And my lane has been copywriting for the longest time. But the thing that really stirs me is helping particularly small business owners get better results from LinkedIn. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And you get more of what you focus on. So if I'm trying to wear multiple hats, spin multiple plates, it's not going to work as well, or I'll just end up being exhausted. So I've decided to step back from copywriting and focus on the thing that gives me a bit more joy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. And as a small business owner now myself, I really appreciate that. But I want to bring back to the list. So the other list that you do is the Friday shout.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
and how long have you been running that actually?
Friday Shout started in early 2018, so it's right now it's been just over 4 years. So going back to the days when I was a bit more active on Twitter, I always used to see Follow Fridays, and it ended up being a bit of a hashtag spam event. I didn't really think that much, and I thought I could do something on LinkedIn just to shout out someone who seems to be doing good work. So let me just do that. And then I did it again the next week, and I kept going. And now I haven't stopped, and it's been more than 4 years. So we've got a group of getting on for 200 people that I've showcased over those years of what I call good hearts and minds, people doing nice things on LinkedIn and elsewhere. And it's just become a lovely part of my week. And it's been interesting from the content creation point of view, because in the first, I would say, year to 18 months, no one even noticed that I was doing it. It was just a thing I did, and it
Yeah.
got zero traction. These days, the videos that I do tend to get a lot more views and interaction, and some people have even again asked, could I be in this? And I'm thinking, well, I've got a short list and I know who's going to be in there and when they're going to be in there. So just wait your turn and maybe you'll be lucky. But if you're specifically asking to be in there, that's probably not a good sign.
Right, exactly. It's almost like a bellwether. It's like the canary in the coal mine. So, what has been the most gratifying thing that you've been part of? I know you do a lot of charity events and a lot of different waves of supporting people.
I try my best. I think the two that stand out most recently, I was auctioning the last of my set of original books for Inspiring Girls International, who are doing good work to educate, uh, give girls more access to education and career prospects and so forth. And recently I've done a couple of webinars to help out with the relief efforts in Ukraine as well for the refugees, mostly women and children who are trying to get away from trafficking. So those are the two that probably stand out most. But yeah, I'll do my bit where I can. I like to do things where I can put my professional skills to good use where possible. So the Ukraine webinars were good examples. I gave my time to give people some LinkedIn advice, and that's perfect for me because I can give my time, people benefit, maybe they'll have a better LinkedIn presence afterwards. For me, that's more effective than just simply donating money, which I also do a little bit of, but I'd rather put my skills to use. So yeah, that's probably the one that stands out.
Yeah, I attended the one with Leah Turner and Andy Foote,
Hmm.
and the one you did. That was fantastic. It was so incredibly helpful to have that many experts really speaking to all different themes. And it was so worthwhile. And last time I checked, it was like over 65,000 pounds that they raised with that.
It's a lot of money, and it's been interesting because the guy who runs that charity has been creating behind the scenes content and posting it on LinkedIn. And so you can really see where the money's going. And that kind of content really resonates. It really cuts through. There's no kind of glossy brochure here. This is the reality of what it's like to be on the ground. I think maybe more businesses need to think about showing behind the curtain. This is what the reality of our lives are, the way we run our business or whatever. That's the kind of content that really can cut through.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely been worthwhile. I've paid a lot of attention to that. But thank you for doing that. The other thing I wanted to just highlight is you mentioned that you were giving away your book. So John is actually an author. He's written Content DNA, which is actually still on my list. I do have to get it. I haven't actually read it yet, but I do hear it highly recommended. So are you planning to do another book at any point? or is this one in
Yes,
10?
I've got notes for, so Content DNA took me 2 years to put together. I've got notes for my second book, and to keep myself accountable, I am going to start sharing that content with Espresso Plus members as I write it, so that people will get the book as it's being put together. And the thing that was most popular from the first book was people really liked the get to the point openers of each chapter, which really summarized what you were going to learn in just 2 or 3 sentences. And I thought to myself, what if I wrote a whole book like that? So the second book is going to be lots of very short chapters that are going to be hopefully short, sharp lessons on how you can become the most helpful person in your industry, so that you can end up being the person of choice. And that's the idea behind Relentless, which is the second book.
Oh, that's interesting. I love that. And I love you're calling it Relentless. That's good. But it's funny. I'm actually in a kid's book, and the author of the kid's book is Kristen A. Sherry. But she also wrote another book, which is called Maximize 365. And that's how she wrote it. It was 365 tips just for
Mhm.
each day. So if you're not a reader, she has this thing that she has an audience that may not be readers. So her goal was, how do you engage somebody who's not really a reader? So I actually found it a little challenging to read because I am a reader, but
Mhm.
for the person who just wants to read a page a day, it's a good format. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm not a reader anymore. I was. I'm a listener now. I go
Ah,
for a walk every morning, and in that hour and a half, I'm always either listening to a podcast or I'm listening to an ebook, to an audiobook. I just find that the most effective way for me to learn. A
yep.
little bit on YouTube as well, but mostly actually it's listening. So because of that, I thought other people might be the same. So I recorded my book as an audiobook as well. I did debate whether I should use a professional voiceover for it, but in the end I decided to do it myself because people were telling me we'd rather hear it from you. So
Yeah. I much prefer when the author does it. Although I have heard some fantastic fiction books where they've actually employed actors to actually do various different voices, but I understand that more for fiction. But for a nonfiction book, I much prefer the author. So I use audio in a different way. I find it engages me differently. So I'll do it. I'll listen to something as I'm walking and I need to be active, or when I'm doing a task I really don't want to do, like dishes or laundry or something like that, because it encourages me to do that because I'm learning at the same time. So I just find that I don't retain it as well. That's the thing. So I tend to listen to books where the ideas are really vast and I really need to think about it, but not
yeah,
necessarily go back to it. It engages the imagination. That's how I strategically use it. So for
yeah,
Content DNA, for example, that's a book I know that I'm going to want to have in print because
yeah.
you're giving tips that I might want to revisit. And with audio, it's what chapter was that in? I find it harder to find the information that way.
And plenty of people have said that they want to make notes in the book, and it's just practical to have a physical copy. But
Yeah.
yeah, with me, I tend to, because I listen to so much content, I usually think if I can listen to a book and get one really good idea from it, that's sufficient. That will have been a worthwhile investment of my time, because I've got something, one good thing I can go away and do. I don't have the expectation of having 30 brilliant ideas from reading a single book. That never transpires for me. If I can get one, I'll be happy. If it makes a real difference, I'll be happy.
Yep. Yep. No, that's a good way to do it. The Stephen Pressfield books are fun. I like those in audio. He has just such a way of writing. So, what did you learn from writing your book? What were your takes as being a first time author? And what are you going to change with this new book?
It was certainly a lot of hard work to gather the notes together. I think the big mistake that I made with that book is, instead of just having a whole pile of notes, I probably ought to have written a list of chapter headings and then written to that as if it were a copywriting brief. Chapter 1 through to 30, here are the titles. Now we need to write each chapter, as opposed to collecting years worth of notes and then thinking, okay, how am I going to structure this now?
Where does it fit?
Exactly. So it would have been more efficient on me if I had been a bit more rigid with structure up front. But the process of writing the book, and this is something that my marketing mentor, Mark Schaefer, also says, the process of writing a book makes you better at delivering that skill that you're talking about in the book. So it's that old idea of if you really want to learn something, then try to teach it. And this is what I'm trying to do with the book, is I'm trying to teach people how to get their personal brand sorted and create effective content. And so I think the standard of my content has gone up as a result of all of the time I've spent trying to convey in simple terms how to do it to others. So that's been the valuable thing for me. But I don't think the second book is going to be anywhere near as long, but I'm going to try and pack in just as much information in a smaller form factor, and hopefully it'll be even more useful to people.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Yeah, it's almost like you're role modeling, right? Because you're writing the tips, you're trying them out yourself, and you're role modeling and road testing your advice. So yeah, I like people who do that. But is there anything else that you would like to mention so that people are aware of? I think we've covered an awful lot of how you.
Yeah, I think the other than the community, which we've already talked about, really interested in ethical best practice for LinkedIn. There's a lot of people who are self-appointed growth hacking experts who will seem to promise you 1 million leads tomorrow and 100,000 followers next week. And I don't really buy into all of that. It's taken me really ages to get to the point where I can write a book or I can start a community that actually has people interested in joining it. And that's what I always refer to as the unsexy message. You've got to turn up, and you've got to turn up for quite a long time for this stuff to work. So I'm interested in speaking with people who've got that long view and who are, let's say, willing to invest a few years of their time to build a really meaningful presence without any cheats, shortcuts. You're not going to get abs tomorrow, basically. You've got to keep going to the gym. And it will
I
eventually
actually
work out
literally
for you.
just was reading, somebody had written I don't know if you call Schaefer. He was writing an article about that too.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
There you go.
quite funny. So yeah, no, I started writing on LinkedIn after my mom died. So 2017. So
Yeah.
5 years, and I'm closing
Same as
in
me.
on 5,000.
Yeah, same as me. I got involved only in 2017 properly. I signed up a long time ago, and it's the typical story. Nothing happens at first, but if you keep showing up, eventually, if you're good enough, you will get noticed, and it's just a gradual process. And then all of a sudden, people who discover you later on will think you've always been successful because look at how many followers you've got or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just never the case. It's never the case. So
yeah, it's funny. People have started saying that to me recently. I get these inbox messages, and they're like, I don't know if you check your messages because you have so many followers. And I'm just like,
right.
okay, apparently 5,000 is really where.
You want to go back to those people and say, where were you 3 years ago or wherever?
Well, it's funny because I never, initially when I started growing it, I was internal. So like my focus was never on numbers. It was always more on who I was connecting with. And I don't think I've changed that. So I will accept random people and get to know them that way. But it's the intention. And honestly, I've noticed with the podcast, like I don't like being cold pitched to be on my podcast. So
No,
I
absolutely.
want I want you to be on my podcast because I'm interested in you and I know who you are and I know what you do and I know how you approach things and that you're ethical and all that stuff. So it's the same sort of thing. Yeah. The only thing that I will mention is I know we've had this discussion before about how to actually turn up in like LinkedIn news.
Yes, we have. Yeah.
John and I have a different opinion on that one.
You've cracked some secrets there, but yeah, good for you. If it helps you ethically grow your business, then it's a good thing. And the topics you talk about are important. I've been working remotely since 2009. So for me, remote work is it's just what you do. To think that anyone would think differently is just weird to me because that's all I've known for more than a decade. But yeah, so I wish you all the best in growing your following so that you can spread that message of hybrid work.
And it's more about how do you amplify the conversation and empower employees really to have those productive conversations and give them something specific that they can reference to have a productive conversation with a manager who might just not. And that's really where my interest is in growing that. Yeah. And as you say, it's really just solely because it's newsworthy right now that it's been working, I think. So, but anyways. All right. We will make sure that John's LinkedIn link is there, the link for Content DNA, the sign up for Espresso Plus. Is there anything else you'd like me to put in there?
I think that would be more than enough. Thank you, Nola.
That's enough. Okay, we'll put that all in the show notes. But I really appreciate you joining me. I leave John in Wales. You're Wales, right?
That's right.
And this afternoon, I have another podcast with Newfoundland. And then I'm going to be releasing this quarter's podcast, hopefully by Sunday. So listen soon. So thank you so much, John.
You're welcome, Nola.